Well, hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. I am here today because the Women's Prize Shortlist for 2020 has been announced, so we got to react to it. Obviously, there are 6 finalists, and of them, I own 3, which seems really good. So we'll get right into it. It feels this year, because of everything going on, there's going to be a bit of a gap. They're announcing the shortlist now, but the winner will not be announced until September. And specifically, the winner will be announced on September 9th. So we have a long way to go before we get there, but still, it's very exciting. So let's kind of get into who the finalists are. The finalists are Dominicana by Angie Cruz, Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo, 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes, The Mirror and the Light by Hilary Mantel, Hamnet by Maggie OMalley, and Weather by Jenny Offill. Let's take a closer look, and of course, let's start with the ones that I have right here. And since this one is on top, let's just go with it. Obviously, this is Hilary Mantel's The Mirror and the Light. It is a hefty, chunky book. I'm really looking forward to reading this. If you don't know what this is, who are you? Where are you? It is the conclusion of the trilogy of books Hilary Mantel has written about the life of Thomas Cromwell and his relationship with Henry VIII. Obviously, this is the one that includes his downfall and ultimate execution, which is not a spoiler, it's history. I'm really looking forward to reading this. I've heard really good things about it from people who have picked it up so far. It seems like it goes... So Wolf Hall was really dense. Bring Up the Bodies was much more about a specific moment in time, so it's not as dense. And this clearly seems to go back to the Wolf Hall thing, and I've heard some people react a little negatively to that, but what I've heard by and large is that it's phenomenal and really good, and I'm very much looking forward to it. I think, you know, we're getting kind of close to Booker season, and I think this has obviously a good shot at being on the long list, probably on the short list. The first 2 volumes won the Booker Prize. It'll be interesting to see if this one can do that, but we're talking about the Women's Prize. I've already told you what it's about, but just to do a quick blurb from this. England, May 1536. Anne Boleyn is dead, decapitated in the space of a heartbeat by a hired French executioner. As her remains are bundled into oblivion, Thomas Cromwell breakfasts with the victors. The blacksmith's son from Putney emerges from the spring's bloodbath to continue his climb to power and wealth, while his formidable master, Henry VIII, settles to short-lived happiness with his 3rd wife, Jane Seymour. Cromwell is a man with only his wits to rely on. He has no great family to back him, no private army. Despite rebellion at home, traitors plotting abroad, and the threat of invasion testing Henry's regime to breaking point, Cromwell's robust imagination sees a new country in the mirror of the future. But can a nation or a person shed the past like a skin? Do the dead continually unbury themselves? What will you do, the Spanish ambassador asks Cromwell, when the king turns on you, as sooner or later he turns on everyone close to him? I am really looking forward to reading this. I know a lot of people use this as their mammoth for March of the Mammoths. I clearly did not, but I am really looking forward to getting to it, and hopefully I will sometime soon. Unlike Girl, Woman, Other, which is another book I've really wanted to read, and because we're coming into Booker season, that means it's been a year since I first heard about this book, and I haven't read it yet, and I really need to do that. It was the co-winner of the Booker Prize last year with Margaret Atwood's The Testaments, so it's already got some awards momentum heading into the Women's Prize. Not surprised it made the finalists at all. I'm also not surprised The Mirror and the Light made the shortlist. I think those are probably the 2 least surprising finalists. It was easy to predict that they would both make it. This one is basically a tapestry of different women living in England, and in creating this tapestry, it reveals lives that are not typically told in fiction and which typically don't reach the top of the news cycle in England, and just shines a light on stories that have not really been told. I've heard some people react a little bit negatively to it, but most of the feedback I've gotten on it is really positive. I'm very much looking forward to it. I've mentioned many times that Bernardine Evaristo also seems to be an author who has a really great backlist to discover. I have another book of hers that I ordered called Mr. Loverman, which is sitting on my bookshelves and waiting for me to get to that as well. I'm really looking forward to getting to this. Since I did a blurb for The Mirror and the Light, let's do a quick one for this. Welcome to Britain and 12 very different people, mostly women, mostly black, who call it home. Teeming with life and crackling with energy, Girl, Woman, Other follows them across the miles and down the years with vivid originality, irrepressible wit, and sly wisdom. Bernardine Evaristo presents a gloriously new kind of history for this old country, ever dynamic, ever expanding, and utterly irresistible. I'm really looking forward to getting to that. I think it's safe to say these have a really good shot at getting in there, but I don't really want to predict a winner, and there's at least one other that I think has a pretty good shot, and we'll get to that. Let's do the last one that I have a copy of, and actually I think this one has a pretty good shot as well. It's Dominicana by Angie Cruz. I was surprised this made the shortlist, and then as soon as it made the shortlist, I was no longer surprised because it kind of makes sense. So this is a bit of a Marmite book. I've heard really great reviews about it, but I've also heard really negative reviews of it. The people who like it just love it and say it's really good, but the people who hate it say it's kind of offensive. So what made it not surprising that it made the shortlist was that the winner last year was An American Marriage by Tayari Jones, which was kind of in the same position. I absolutely hated An American Marriage by Tayari Jones, but there were a lot of people who just loved it and thought it was brilliant, and I see why they did. It's one of those situations where I responded to things differently than people do because we all bring our own baggage into books. So that's just the way it shook out, and I think Dominicana could be the same thing, which could mean it has a shot. Who knows? I've been looking forward to reading this. Obviously, I've been looking forward to reading the first three that I've talked about because I purchased copies of them. Let's do a blurb. 15-year-old Ana Cancion never dreamed of moving to America the way the girls she grew up with in the Dominican countryside did. But when Juan Ruiz proposes and promises to take her to New York City, she must say yes. It doesn't matter that he is twice her age or that there is no love between them. Their marriage is an opportunity for her entire close-knit family to eventually immigrate. So on New Year's Day, 1965, Ana leaves behind everything she knows and becomes Ana Ruiz, a wife confined to a cold, sixth-floor walk-up in Washington Heights. Lonely and miserable, Ana hatches a reckless plan to escape. But at the bus terminal, she is stopped by Cesar, Juan's free-spirited younger brother, who convinces her to stay. As the Dominican Republic slides into political turmoil, Juan returns to protect his family's assets, leaving Cesar to take care of Ana. Suddenly, Ana is free to take English lessons at a local church, lie on the beach at Coney Island, dance with Cesar at the Audubon Ballroom, and imagine the possibility of a different kind of life in America. When Juan returns, Ana must decide once again between her heart and her duty to her family. To me, that sounds really interesting, especially the position this girl is in the 1960s. The portrait of New York City in the 1960s also sounds really interesting to me as somebody who is, I was born on Long Island, but I consider myself a native New Yorker. So even though I've heard negative things about it, I'm kind of eager to try it for myself. So like I said, I think this has probably the dark horse status in the competition. It has a shot at winning. Especially if history repeats and the situation with An American Marriage last year does repeat. So those are the three books I own. Let's jump to the one I really, really want to own, but it is not available in the US, and I'm telling myself not to order it until it is available in the US, even though I really like the UK cover better. And I'm going to put the UK cover here. I'll show you the American cover briefly, and then I'll go back to the UK cover because I like the UK cover better. But I'm telling myself that I'm going to wait. So it's not available in the US until July. I think it's not available until July 21st in the US, and I really want it. It's Hamnet by Maggie OMalley. Now, let's go to the blurb from Goodreads. Drawing on Maggie OMalley's long-term fascination with the little-known story behind Shakespeare's most enigmatic play, Hamnet is a luminous portrait of a marriage at its heart, the loss of a beloved child. Warwickshire in the 1580s. Agnes is a woman as feared as she is sought after for her unusual gifts. She settles with her husband in Henley Street, Stratford, and has 3 children, a daughter, Susanna, and then twins, Hamnet and Judith. The boy, Hamnet, dies in 1596, aged 11. 4 years or so later, the husband writes a play called Hamlet. Award-winning author Maggie OMalley's new novel breathes full-blooded life into the story of a loss usually consigned to literary footnotes and provides an unforgettable vindication of Agnes, a woman intriguingly absent from history. I really want to read this. I really, really, really want to read this. But the same could be true, as is true of Girl, Woman, Other, and the Mirror and the Light. This is the one I was talking about that I think also has a really good shot. Because, especially at this point, you could say Hilary Mantel and Bernardine Evaristo have already won a lot. They probably don't need a whole lot of attention. The Mirror and the Light is probably a shoo-in for at least the shortlist of the Booker Prize. Girl, Woman, Other has already won or co-won the Booker Prize. So if the Women's Prize wants to spread the wealth a little bit, this feels like a really good place to do it. And Maggie OMalley feels like an author who has been gaining renown and is probably poised for a big win. So I think it would make a lot of sense if this one does win. I'm not going to predict a winner, but it does feel like she's in good position for it. So take all the things I've said about what might win into account. If you would like to make a prediction, I'm just going to leave them out there, and you may take what you will from them. The next one is 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes. This one is interesting because last year Pat Barker's book, which was a myth retelling, also made the shortlist. But the feedback I've gotten is that basically this is kind of the feedback is kind of better than the Pat Barker one. And I wasn't too keen on the Pat Barker one, even though I really want to reread the Regeneration trilogy, as I've mentioned recently. But let's talk about 1,000 Ships. This was never the story of one woman or two. It was the story of all of them. In the middle of the night, Cruz wakes to find her beloved Troy engulfed in flames. 10 seemingly endless years of brutal conflict between the Greeks and the Trojans are over, and the Greeks are victorious. Over the next few hours, the only life she has ever known will turn to ash. The devastating consequences of the fall of Troy stretch from Mount Olympus to Mount Ida, from the citadel of Troy to the distant Greek islands, and across oceans and sky in between. These are the stories of the women embroiled in that legendary war and its terrible aftermath, as well as the feud and the fatal decisions that started it all. Powerfully told from an all-female perspective, 1,000 Ships gives voice to the women, girls, and goddesses who, for so long, have been silent. Obviously, the Pat Barker book last year was The Silent Girls, The Silent Women. I can't remember. Something similar to that. And it was supposedly told from the perspective of the women, but it had a male voice in there, from what I've heard. I haven't read it. So this seems to be one that is actually only from the perspective of the women, which does sound interesting. I am interested in reading this, but I would prioritize, say, the 3 books I already own, or Hamnet above it. But it does sound really interesting. Then we have Weather by Jenny Offill. Now, I read The Department of Speculation, which was her previous book, and I really enjoyed it. I am not super surprised that this made the shortlist. It's gotten really good feedback from everything I've seen so far. Let's go to the blurb. Lizzie Benson slid into her job as a librarian without a traditional degree, but this gives her a vantage point from which to practice her other calling. She is a fake shrink. For years, she has tended to her God-haunted mother and her recovering addict brother. They have both stabilized for the moment, but Lizzie has little chance to spend her new free time with husband and son before her old mentor, Sylvia Liller, makes a proposal. She's become famous for her prescient podcast, Hell and High Water, and wants to hire Lizzie to answer the mail she receives from left-wingers worried about climate change and right-wingers worried about the decline of Western civilization. As Lizzie dives into this polarized world, she begins to wonder what it means to keep tending your own garden once you've seen the flames beyond its walls. When her brother becomes a father and Sylvia a recluse, Lizzie is forced to address the limits of her own experience, but still she tries to save everyone, using everything she's learned about empathy and despair, conscience and collusion, from her years of wandering the library stacks, and all the while the voices of the city keep floating in, funny, disturbing, and increasingly mad. Sounds like a really good book. I am very eager to read this, and like I said, the feedback I've gotten on it so far has been positive. I don't think I've heard a negative point of view about this book, and it would seem that this is also a very timely book. You could make the same argument for, say, Dominicana, because the topic of immigration, it's much more of an American topic, and the Women's Prize is British, but this one could be seen as timely. Girl, Woman, Other could be seen as timely, but Weather, specifically its angle on climate change and the divide between the right-wingers and the left-wingers, could give it a bit of an edge in that department. So, again, I'm not going to make a prediction of what I think will win, I will leave that to the experts on this topic, your Simon Savage or Eric Carl Anderson. I will let them make predictions. I just wanted to react to the list because I think these seem like really great books, and I'm happy to talk about them. And I think there's an argument that you could make for every single one of these books to win. And because of that, I'm just not going to make a prediction. In terms of books on the long list that did not make it, that I think are surprising, I am a little bit surprised Anne Enright and Actress did not make it. I'm also surprised Jacqueline Woodson didn't make it for Red at the Bone. They probably dodged a bullet by not including Edna O'Brien's Girl on the short list. I thought that book sounded interesting because I had not heard of it until I read the blurb when I did my long list reaction, which I will link down below. But the feedback immediately pointed me to the controversy of representation that followed with it. Edna O'Brien is a white woman writing about Africa and turmoil there. Feedback I've heard on the book is mixed, but I think by not including it, they probably dodged a bullet in terms of controversy with that. Some of the books that I thought sounded really interesting, like How We Disappeared, it would have been nice to see some of these smaller books that don't have the renown of, say, The Mirror and the Light or Girl, Woman, Other. Maybe Queenie, but I've heard kind of mixed things about that as well. The Dutch House by Ann Patchett, I included that in my list of predictions for the Pulitzer Prize. It does seem to be a book that people are kind of meh about by and large. So overall, I'm not super surprised. I do think it would have been nice if something like How We Disappeared had made it in, just to get a little bit more of a bump for the author. But I would also love to hear what you think. Have you read any of these? Are you rooting for any particular title? Is there something that you wish had made the shortlist? Is there something that you wish had made the long list? Again, Duck's New Report did not make the long list, which of course means it didn't make the shortlist. But if there are any other omissions that you are thinking of, I'd love to hear them as well. And yeah, we have a long road to go until September when the winner will be announced. Booker season is not that far away, so there are, fun things coming in the book world, even if the real world continues to be kind of weird and dicey. And I hope you're doing well, by the way. I hope that goes without saying. It's strange times for everyone. But anyway, thank you for your time watching this video. As always, it is very appreciated. And I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.